Welcome to the US Daily Brief channel. Volodymyr Zelensky continues to liberate lands in the east and south of Ukraine. In Ukraine, where the war continues at full speed, Russian troops are having a hard time. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine prepares to enter its 8th month, Vladimir Putin is shocked by news from the front. The sounds of rebellion continue to rise from the front line of the Russian army, which is being dragged to defeat step by step. The Russian army, which retreated in the face of the Ukrainian attacks, reveals that the fate of the war has radically changed with the traces it left behind while escaping. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has closed his eyes and ears to all developments and refuses to see the facts. Having suffered heavy defeats since September, Russia cannot stop the Ukrainian army and the Russian front line has fallen. Struck in the swamp in Ukraine, Russian leader Vladimir Putin played all his cards to get back on the land he lost in the front he resisted for 7 months. With Putin's partial mobilization decision, it was decided to form reinforcements for the Russian army, which could not deliver what was expected in the occupation they started at full speed. With the announcement that 300,000 reserve soldiers would be sent to Ukraine, hundreds of thousands of Russians fled the country without looking back. Despite all efforts, a victory in Ukraine can no longer be imagined with the decisions taken by Putin. Russian soldiers are rebelling against Putin's draft on poor logistics. Putin is also taking blow after blow from his own country. The Russian regiment gave Vladimir Putin a hammer blow for refusing to take up arms against the Ukrainian forces. Hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers have fled the country since Vladimir Putin ordered a partial mobilization to avoid being sent to war as cannon fodder. As a result of the draft's successful Ukrainian counterattacks on all fronts in eastern and southern Ukraine, the departure of Russian citizens became a matter of survival. Reports and videos have surfaced showing Putin's efforts to counter the attacks. Russian soldiers rebelling against the Kremlin due to the lack of resources and poor living conditions on the battlefield. Soldiers from the Russian Tamin Division, 1st Tank Battalion, 500-man regiment of the 3rd Tank Squadron refused to take up arms and raise the rebel flag. Soldiers at the front continues to talk about the difficult living conditions they experienced. Russian soldiers stated that they bought machine guns without signing any document and that they were not registered in the military IDs. It is also said that there is no stamp inside the Russian military ID. It is said that the Russian troops in this division are not officially registered in any way, and their bank accounts and debit cards are not active. Russian soldiers tell that they were dispersed into the forest and they were fighting for their lives in the ditches they dug. The Russian leader is ashamed of the defeats in Ukraine and every move ends in an even worse outcome. As Putin's forces continue to push back by Ukraine's effective counterattack, the morale of Russian troops and citizens is very low. It exhausted the Russian soldiers as it lasted much longer than the 3-day lightning strike predicted by Vladimir Putin. As winter approaches, there will be a major slowdown in the combat in terms of Russian troops' movement, and it will become even more inflamed as forces await resumptions of actions. Despite this, Putin is fighting to fill the front lines of Ukraine's battlefield with new Russian troops as he suffers heavy losses. The reinforcements that Putin sent to the front are not very motivated to recapture these areas. The rebellions and cries for help of Russian soldiers, which are also mentioned in the images and news from the front, are proof that there is a big problem in Ukraine. Russian soldiers are fleeing just for their lives, and this is important to understand, but it also coincides with the mobilization in Russia. The long duration of the high-intensity war made the Ukrainian army tired as well as the Russian army. But of course, in the Ukrainian army, there is a constant reinforcement by trained troops. We know that there is a large military base in the UK, that Germany trained the Americans and the Ukrainians learn new technologies, new equipment and deploy quite successfully to ensure this victory. There is also a desire and determination to liberate it as much as possible because the horrors experienced by the civilians. In addition, the political will and support of the society and the army is very high in the success of Ukraine and in the progress of Zelensky. On the other hand, Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine continues to save the lands in the east and south of the country. Russian Defense Ministry maps shows that their occupation forces are retreating rapidly. The ministry's daily video briefing does not mention any retreat, but on maps used to show the location of the alleged Russian attacks, The shaded area showing Russian military control appears to be smaller than the previous day. Maps at Tuesday's daily military briefing shows that Russian forces are no longer in control of the village of Dachany on the west bank of the Dnipro River, and that Ukrainian forces are pushing to retake territory captured at the start of the Moscow's offensive. In Kiev's northeastern Kharkiv region, where battlefield victories began in early September, Russian Defense Ministry maps show Russian forces leaving their positions on the west bank of the Oskil River. In his nightly speech on Tuesday, Zelensky said the Ukrainian army had made pretty rapid and strong progress. Western officials said on Tuesday that Ukraine dictated the operational tempo on the battlefield and doubled whether Russia had the ambition or the ability to return to the offensive. According to the reports of the Ukrainian defense, Russia has already lost about 50,000 personnel. Ukrainian forces are encouraging Russian soldiers at the front to surrender peacefully. It has been reported that many calls have been received to the phone line called "I Want to Live," which was established for the surrender of Russian soldiers. More than 2,000 applications have already been received. Both the soldiers of the Russian army and the Russian citizens who want the survival of their sons and husbands are looking for this line. It was stated that the surrendered Russian soldiers would be treated according to the Geneva Conventions. Among other items, 3 meals a day, medical care, and the opportunity to communicate with relatives are given to Russian citizens who surrender. In Ukraine, the only way to avoid death is seen as surrender. Ukrainian forces have already approached 4 illegally annexed areas in southern and eastern Ukraine in a rapid counteroffensive. In the aftermath of these developments, in his last televised speech in the Kremlin, Putin retreated to use all Russian means to defeat the regions and again put forward the threat of nuclear war. Putin does not want to see that he is defeated in Ukraine yet, and underlines that with these threats, he can bring the world to the brink of the abyss at every opportunity. Since the recent nuclear threats by Vladimir Putin, there has been no signs of any unusual activity surrounding Moscow's nuclear arsenal. But it's becoming incredibly impossible for Putin to intimidate Ukraine into subjugation. At the moment, the Ukrainian warriors are advancing victoriously both in the east and in the south. The entire logistic of the Russian army has collapsed and Putin's strategies are exhausted. Neither the mobilization in Russia nor the annexation of 4 regions of Ukraine could save Putin. On the contrary, these decisions of Putin angered both Russians and Ukrainians and drew the reaction of the whole world. Now he has completely fallen out of favor with the Russians and completely lacks the charismatic, strong leadership qualities they have known for 20 years. Along with the logistics and military problems of the Russian army, the scandals in the Kremlin and the popular revolts in Russia are all problems arising from Putin's sick ego. It looks like Putin will be stuck in this stalemate. If you want to follow the hot developments closely, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.